Welcome everyone to the first video blog edition of In the Cage with Bards. I, of course, am Carlin Bardsley. We're here to talk about UFC 126 and the aftermath thereof. Of course, headlined by the middleweight title showdown between champion Anderson Silva and Vitor the Phenom Belfort. It was a very interesting fight. We saw 2 minutes of a staring contest, and then we saw a flurry and an incredible front kick finish from Anderson Silva. If you haven't seen it yet, by God, seek it out. YouTube, Dailymotion, whatever kind of piracy you have to do. I'm not telling you what to do, but I am telling you to see it. It ended 325 in round one, and Silva has proven once again that no matter how eccentric a gentleman he may be, he is truly the best in the world. Also worth noting, Steven Seagal was in Anderson's entourage, and in several interviews after the fight, took credit for teaching Anderson that variation of the front kick. Steven Seagal. Yeah. I've got nothing else that can't be said about that. But the big news coming out of the fight is that Dana White has said the ultimate super fight UFC has in its cards right now, Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre, will happen if George gets by Jake Shields in April at Toronto's Skydome. I'm a paying customer, I'm a fight fan, I would love to see that happen. But as much as I am a Canadian and I would love to see GSP win, I'm not certain it would happen. It could be a bad matchup for him simply because of the size factor. Anderson Silva is 6'3" and he walks around about 225 pounds. George St. Pierre is about 5'10" and walks around about 190 pounds. Even if GSP takes the time that he says he will to get up to Anderson's size and be a competitive 185er, one has to wonder if GSP's wrestling ability, his wrestling-based attack, will be compromised against a guy as large as Anderson Silva. Nevertheless, I'm super pumped to see GSP get by Jake Shields and get to that mega fight with Anderson Silva. In the semi-main event, it was, again, the deciding factor was size, as we saw Rich Franklin take on Forrest Griffin. Looking at the two of them next to each other, Forrest Griffin looked absolutely even a weight class above Rich Franklin. He was able to grind out a decision victory. It was not the slugfest a lot of people were expecting. But Forrest Griffin, you know, he was able to John Fitch his way to victory, as you might say. He grinded it out. And I guess the amount you would have enjoyed the fight is the amount you enjoy watching a guy like John Fitch fight. You know, it's up to you. I'm not going to tell you what to like, what not to dislike. But looking at the two men next to each other, Forrest was clearly the larger individual and was able to use that size to his advantage to wear Franklin down, to really, you know, make him carry that weight against the fence. And at the end, Forrest is back in the 205-pound mix. Where Rich Franklin goes from here, I really don't know. We saw Franklin get chased out of the 185-pound division by Anderson Silva. Again, a much larger individual, but if Rich can't hang with a guy like Forrest Griffin at 205, it makes you wonder what he's doing in the division. He almost looks perfectly slotted for a guy like, or for a weight class rather, like 195, where he fought Vanderlei Silva, a kind of in-between middleweight, light heavyweight. If the UFC adopts a cruiserweight division, it would be perfect for him. If not, I don't know what to say about Rich at this point. Also, big news. In the fight to determine the next big thing at 205 pounds, we saw John Jones absolutely dismantle Ryan Darth Bader. The man known as Johnny Bones Jones completely outclassed Bader before securing the tap out via Darth's choke in round two. Bader had no answer for Jones no matter where the fight went. I was a guy who thought that Bader was going to provide a challenge for Jones, a guy that had an outside chance of winning the fight, but nevertheless it was not to be. Bader was not the guy to derail the Jones hype train. Bader, you know, we've seen him as a dominant wrestler before. Nevertheless, it did not happen. We even saw him pull half guard before succumbing to turning right into the Darce choke, quite frankly. And now the really big news happens after the fight, as it was announced in the cage that Rashad Evans has injured his knee, and now John Jones will fight Shogun Rua for the light heavyweight championship in 6 weeks. And even though Jones has a spectacular highlight reel, I think it might be too early to be hot-shotting him into the title picture, given that his win over Bader is his biggest name win to date. And, you know, he has yet to prove himself against the upper echelon of the division. Personally, I would have much preferred to see a guy like Rampage Jackson get the shot. He's a former champion. He's coming off a win over Lyoto Machida, which is not an easy thing to do. And he's currently slotted to fight Thiago Silva in May. I would have liked to have seen Rampage versus Shogun too. They have history coming from the Pride organization. Rampage Shogun 2 is an easy fight to market. And, you know, quite frankly, as a paying consumer, that is a fight I want to see. I would have much rather see them bump Rampage, let John Jones fight Thiago Silva in May, let him prove himself that way. You know, but one has to wonder what happens to Rashad Evans at this point. You know, he waited a whole year to fight Shogun. Now he's hurt his knee, and he's saying that he's predicting his teammate, his Jackson Submission Academy teammate, to win the fight against Shogun. And where does he go from here? He won't fight Shogun. He says he will either move up to heavyweight or he'll go down to middleweight. So, when you think about it, was Rashad better off waiting a year to take a fight that didn't happen? Elsewhere on the card, we saw welterweight Jake Ellenberger able to grind out a split decision victory over Carlos Rocha. Ellenberger may have gotten the win, but it was Rocha and his jiu-jitsu I was most impressed with. And, you know, I think this is one of those situations where a loss really means more than a win because of the way he went out and fought. I look forward more to seeing more of Rocha in the future than I do Mr. Ellenberger. All due respect to him. And kicking out the pay-per-view, we saw former WEC bantamweight champion Miguel Torres use his reach to keep Antonio Banuelos at bay and really cruise to a decision win. Not a fight to write home about, but Torres went in with a game plan, and he really showed that he can follow a game plan and is really setting the table for future things in the bantamweight division. The real excitement seemed to happen on the undercard, as Donald the Cowboy Cerrone not only won his UFC debut against Paul Telly Kelly out of England via rear naked choke in the second round, but Cerrone and Kelly both took down the Fight of the Night honors. They got the cash, they got the respect, they got it all. It was a really fun fight on the feet, and Kelly landed some decent shots, including a questionable one to start the fight. But it was the man who calls himself Cowboy who dominated on the ground. Kelly was simply no match for Cowboy on the ground. And it was only a matter of time before Cerrone really was able to get a submission win or win the fight via a ground and pound stoppage. Up next for Cerrone, it could be the much talked about grudge fight with Cole Miller. Again, we're talking about the paying consumer. I'm ready to see that fight. Also shown on Spike TV were featherweights Chad Money Mendez and Michihiro Omigawa. They put on a show with Mendez controlling the action en route to a decision victory. Mendez, he was able to land the right hand, what seemed like at will, against Omigawa, but I was really impressed with Omigawa's Bushido-like never say die attitude. It really looked like they were going to have to carry Omigawa out before he would actually quit the fight. This is a fight that, again, you know, you probably saw it if you're watching Spike TV. But if not, this is one of my favorite fights of the night. Mendez out of the alpha male camp with Uriah Faber. He's improving himself. And maybe he's a guy that may get a featherweight title shot against the winner of Mark Hominick. And, of course, pound-for-pound favorite, Jose Aldo. And they even put the fights on the Facebook, as they say. Kid Yamamoto, the Japanese sensation. It was streamed live on Facebook, but it didn't have a happy ending for him as he took on Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. And Johnson looked incredible in the fight. He was just too quick for the, admittedly quick Yamamoto. Demetrius Johnson was that much quicker. He landed some amazing takedowns. And, he really showed himself to be a force in the bantamweight division. I was incredibly impressed by that. Again, this is one you should seek out if you haven't seen it already. Demetrius Johnson, that guy has success written all over for him, and put in a much better performance than what I saw out of Miguel Torres, who is the bigger fight with the bigger name, and he made the main card. So we're gonna have to see what happens out of those guys. Other prelim action saw Kyle Kingsbury drop Ricardo Romero in just 21 seconds. And if you're like me and you like seeing Gabe Rudiger get kicked in the head, I'm sorry, I know Krzysztof Sosinski has told me that Gabe is actually a really cool dude in person, but there's something about his on-screen persona that really bothers me. So you'll like watching last night's fight where Rudiger went against Paul Taylor, and Taylor introduced shin to chin, baby, and sent Rudiger to the mat, pummeling about from there for a TKO in round 2. The bottom line on UFC 26 is that the undercard really did steal the thunder from the main event, the main card rather. But eventually what most people will be talking about is Anderson Silva's front kick to the face of Vitor Belfort, and John Jones getting the light heavyweight title fight against Shogun Rua. Don't forget to listen to the radio show. It happens 4:30 p.m. Pacific time every Tuesday, 101.9 if you're in Vancouver. And if you're not, it's all over the interweb at www.citr.ca. And of course, there will be a podcast link here on the show's Facebook page. So if you're seeing this, you'll know how to find it. This week's show, we look at Strikeforce's Heavyweight Grand Prix, and also have an interview with Jonathan Tweediel, a member of the Vancouver Athletic Commission, talking about the struggle that MMA features and faces here in the city of Vancouver. Don't you dare miss it. For In the Cage with Bards, I am Carlin Bardsley, and until next time, the bell has sounded.